你聽2.0，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Part 2嘅第6節啦。呢一節嘅名叫做 Of What Took Place Between Don Quixote and His Niece and Housekeeper, One of the Most Important Chapters in the Whole History。 佢自稱呢一個係好緊要喎，個內容就係主要就係 Don Quixote 同佢兒生女啦，同埋佢 housekeeper 嘅管家嘅對話啫。應該係 housekeeper 都係女性嚟嘅，係兩位女士嘅對話，對照翻上一次 Sancho 同佢太太嘅對話，臨別之前、道別之前嘅一啲交代性嘅說話啦。咁我哋睇下呢一節咧，Don Quixote 同佢屋企人嘅辭別又會係一個咩景象
？While Sancho Panza and his wife, Teresa Carrasco, held the above irrelevant conversation, Don Quixote's niece and housekeeper were not idle, for by 1,000 signs they began to perceive that their uncle and master meant to give them the slip a third time, and once more betake himself to his, for them, ill-errant chivalry. They strove by all the means in their power to divert him from such an unlucky scheme, but it was all preaching in the desert and hammering cold iron. Nevertheless, among many other representations made to him, the housekeeper said to him, In truth, master, if you do not keep still and stay quiet at home, and give over roaming mountains and valleys like a troubled spirit, looking for what they say are called adventures, but what I call misfortunes, I shall have to make complaint to God and the king with loud supplication to send some remedy. To which Don Quixote replied, What answer God will give to your complaints, housekeeper, I know not, nor what his majesty will answer either. I only know that if I were king, I should decline to answer the numberless silly petitions they present every day. For one of the greatest among the many troubles kings have is being obliged to listen to all and answer all, and therefore I should be sorry that any affairs of mine should worry him. Whereupon the housekeeper said, Tell us, Signor, at his majesty's court are there no knights? There are, replied Don Quixote, and plenty of them, and it is right there should be, to set off the dignity of the prince, and for the greater glory of the king's majesty. Then might not your worship, said she, be one of those that, without stirring a step, serve their king and lord in his court? Recollect, my friend, said Don Quixote, all knights cannot be courtiers, nor can all courtiers be knights-errant, nor need they be. There must be all sorts in the world, and though we may be all knights, there is a great difference between one and another. For the courtiers, without quitting their chambers, or the threshold of the court, range the world over by looking at a map, without its costing them a farthing, without suffering heat or cold, hunger or thirst. But we, the true knights-errant, measure the whole earth with our own feet, exposed to the sun, to the cold, to the air, to the inclemencies of heaven, by day and night, on foot and on horseback. Nor do we only know enemies in pictures, but in their own real shapes, and at all risks and on all occasions we attack them, without any regard to childish points or rules of single combat, whether one has or has not a shorter lance or sword, whether one carries relics or any secret contrivance about him, whether or not the sun is to be divided and portioned out, and other niceties of the sort that are observed in set combats of men to men, that you know nothing about, but I do. And you must know besides, that the true knight-errant, though he may see 10 giants, that not only touch the clouds with their heads, but pierce them, and that go, each of them, on 2 tall towers by way of legs, and whose arms are like the masts of mighty ships, and each eye like a great mill wheel, and glowing brighter than a glass furnace, must not on any account be dismayed by them. On the contrary, he must attack and fall upon them with a gallant bearing and a fearless heart, and, if possible, vanquish and destroy them, even though they have for armor the shells of a certain fish that they say are harder than diamonds, and in place of swords wield trenchant blades of Damascus steel, or clubs studded with spikes also of steel, such as I have more than once seen. All this I say, housekeeper, that you may see the difference there is between the one sort of knight and the other, and it would be well if there were no prince who did not set a higher value on this second, or more properly speaking first, kind of knights-errant, for, as we read in their histories, there have been some among them who have been the salvation, not merely of one kingdom, but of many. Ah, Signor, he exclaimed to Nice, remember that all this you are saying about knights-errant is fable and fiction, and their histories, if indeed they were not burned, would deserve, each of them, to have a Sanbenito put on it, or some mark by which it might be known as infamous and a corrupter of good manners. By the God that gives me life, said Don Quixote, if thou wert not my full niece, being daughter of my own sister, I would inflict a chastisement upon thee for the blasphemy thou hast uttered that all the world should ring with. What? Can it be that a young hussy that hardly knows how to handle a dozen lace bobbin dares to wag her tongue and criticize the histories of knights errant? What would Signor Amadis say if he heard of such a thing? He, however, no doubt would forgive thee, for he was the most humble-minded and courteous knight of his time, and moreover a great protector of damsels. But some there are that might have hurt thee, and it would not have been well for thee in that case, for they are not all courteous or manly. Some are ill-conditioned scoundrels, nor is it everyone that calls himself a gentleman. That is so in all respects. Some are gold, others pinchback, and all look like gentlemen, but not all can stand the touchstone of truth. There are men of low rank who strain themselves to bursting to pass for gentlemen, and high gentlemen who, one would fancy, were dying to pass for men of low rank. The former raise themselves by their ambition or by their virtues, the latter debase themselves by their lack of spirit or by their vices, and one has need of experience and discernment to distinguish these two kinds of gentlemen, so much alike in name and so different in conduct. God bless me, said the niece, that you should know so much, uncle. Enough, it need be, to get up into a pulpit and go preach in the streets, and yet that you should fall into a delusion so great and folly so manifest as to try to make yourself out vigorous when you are old, strong when you are sickly, able to put straight what is crooked when you yourself are bent by age, and above all, a caballero when you are not one. For though gentlefolk may be so, poor men are nothing of the kind. There is a great deal of truth in what you say, niece, returned Don Quixote, and I could tell you somewhat about birth that would astonish you, but not to mix up things human and divine, I refrain. Look you, my dears, all the lineages in the world can be reduced to 4 sorts, which are these: those that had humble beginnings and went on spreading and extending themselves until they attained surpassing greatness; those that had great beginnings and maintained them, and still maintain and uphold the greatness of their origin; those, again, that from a great beginning have ended in a point like a pyramid, having reduced and lessened their original greatness till it has come to naught, like the point of a pyramid, which relatively to its base or foundation is nothing. And then there are those, and it is they that are the most numerous, that have had neither an illustrious beginning nor a remarkable mid-course, and so will have an end without a name, like an ordinary plebeian line. Of the first, those that had an humble origin and rose to the greatness they still preserve, the Ottoman house may serve as an example, which from an humble and lowly shepherd, its founder, has reached the height at which we now see it. For examples of the second sort of lineage that began with greatness and maintains it still without adding to it, there are the many princes who have inherited the dignity and maintain themselves in their inheritance, without increasing or diminishing it, keeping peacefully within the limits of their states. Of those that began great and ended in a point, there are thousands of examples, for all the Varros and Ptolemies of Egypt, the Caesars of Rome, and the whole herd of countless princes, monarchs, lords, leaders, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and barbarians. All these lineages and lordships have ended in a point and come to nothing, they themselves as well as their founders, for it would be impossible now to find one of their descendants, and even should we find one, it would be in some lowly and humble condition. Of plebeian lineages I have nothing to say, save that they merely serve to swell the number of those that live, without any eminence to entitle them to any fame or praise beyond this. From all I have said, I would have you gather, my poor innocents, that great is the confusion among lineages, and that only those are seen to be great and illustrious that show themselves so by the virtue, wealth, and generosity of their possessors. I have said virtue, wealth, and generosity, because a great man who is vicious will be a great example of vice, and a rich man who is not generous will be merely a miserly beggar. For the possessor of wealth is not made happy by possessing it, but by spending it, and not by spending as he pleases, but by knowing how to spend it well. The poor gentleman has no way of showing that he is a gentleman but by virtue, by being affable, well-bred, courteous, gentle-mannered, and kindly, not haughty, arrogant, or censorious, but above all by being charitable. For by 2 maravedis given with a cheerful heart to the poor, he will show himself as generous as he who distributes alms with bell-ringing, and no one that perceives him to be endowed with the virtues I have named. even though he know him not, will fail to recognize and set him down as one of good blood, and it would be strange were it not so. Praise has never been the reward of virtue, and those who are virtuous cannot fail to receive commendation. There are two roads, my daughters, by which men may reach wealth and honors. One is that of letters, the other that of arms. I have more of arms than of letters in my composition, and judging by my inclination to arms, was born under the influence of the planet Mars. I am therefore in a measure constrained to follow that road, and by it I must travel in spite of all the world, and it will be labor in vain for you to urge me to resist what heaven wills. Fate ordains, reason requires, and above all, my own inclination favors. For knowing as I do the countless toils that are the accompaniments of knight-errantry, I know too the infinite blessings that are attained by it. I know that the path of virtue is very narrow, and the road of vice broad and spacious. I know their ends and goals are different, for the broad and easy road of vice ends in death, and the narrow and toilsome one of virtue in life, and not transitory life, but in that which has no end. I know, as our great Castilian poet says, that it is by rugged paths like these they go, that scale the heights of immortality, unreached by those that falter here below. Woe is me, exclaimed the niece. My lord is a poet too. He knows everything, and he can do everything. I will bet, if he chose to turn mason, he could make a house as easily as a cage. I can tell you, niece, replied Don Quixote, if these chivalrous thoughts did not engage all my faculties, there would be nothing that I could not do, nor any sort of knick-knack that would not come from my hands, particularly cages and toothpicks. At this moment there came a knocking at the door, and when they asked who was there, Sancho Panza made answer that it was he. The instant the housekeeper knew who it was, she ran to hide herself so as not to see him. In such abhorrence did she hold him. The niece let him in, and his master Don Quixote came forward to receive him with open arms, and the pair shut themselves up in his room, where they had another conversation not inferior to the previous one.
好，呢一節讀到嚟呢一度，一個單純嘅對話啦，都係由佢嘅兒生女同埋管家提出嚟，質疑佢嘅遊俠精神啊，佢嘅核心價值啦。咁當叫我哋當然係一一去反駁，好長篇大論嘅，字字鏗鏘嘅。咁啊，佢亦都好清楚講咗出嚟，就係遊俠有好多種。就唔係全部咧都要留喺皇宮入面啊，喺宮廷入面咧就侍奉皇室嘅，有一啲咧係要揮頭顱灑熱血喺大地上面，俾太陽照耀住，流出佢滴滴嘅汗水，一步一腳印咁啊完成佢嘅使命。仲有就係佢明知道呢個世界有好多條道路，即係出身好嘅，你可以守財啦，你可以更加飛黃騰達啦。亦都有一啲咧係由低做起嘅，咁佢就 consider 佢自己係一定要實踐嘅人啦，就唔係站坐喺度墨守成規啊。亦都有透露出就係佢係唔甘於平淡嗰日子啦，亦都有講到啊，如果我唔係有呢啲遊俠精神喺我腦入面，我可能真係咩都做到啊，我咩都做得出，我好多嘢都可以 achieve 到，但係冇辦法，因為我只係想做遊俠，咁變咗咧我就只能夠成為遊俠。對話去到最後咧 Sancho 就嚟到Don Quixote屋企啦。咁佢哋兩個男人咧又閂埋房門，又仲有嘢傾。思辨上面咧係飛橫前程緊嘅，但係行動上面咧係仲未出發啦，仲係留喺屋企入面。好，我哋睇下啲字有啲咩字同大家分享。discernment 呢啲係比較常用嘅字啦，其實即係 judgment 嘅意思啦。discernment 名詞嚟嘅 ，the ability to judge well 判斷力啦。Censorious, censorious, censorious, 形容詞嚟嘅 severely critical of others, 批判性好強嘅。transitory 都係形容詞嚟嘅，意思就係 not permanent， 唔係長久嘅，非恒久嘅，一啲會有轉變性嘅嚇。佢嘅文章有提到 transitory life。好，今日讀到呢度，下一次再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽 2.0， 今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Part 2嘅第7節啦。呢一節嘅名叫做 Of what passed between Don Quixote and his squire, together with other very notable incidents。 咁上一回咧就講當叫我哋出發前同佢嘅兒生女同佢女管家之間嘅對話，兩位女士當然係嘗試去說服當叫我哋打消呢個出發嘅念頭，勸佢留喺屋企度休養啊，做翻一個普通人啊。咁當叫我哋就係話佢嘅理想啦，佢對遊俠精神嘅執着啦、堅執啦。佢認為呢一個人要做到出色，喺佢嘅心目中就一定要武裝起嚟上路，做佢嘅歷險，行俠仗義，咁樣咧先至係做一個真漢子。講到最後，佢個兒生女都好似調翻轉頭俾佢說服咗咁，百詞莫辯。咁啊呢個位咧，呢個位置咧 Sancho 咧就嚟到啦，睇下佢哋有啲咩傾。
The instant the housekeeper saw Sancho Panza shut himself in with her master, she guessed what they were about, and suspecting that the result of the consultation would be a resolve to undertake a third sally, she seized her mantle, and in deep anxiety and distress, ran to find the bachelor Samson Carrasco, as she thought that, being a well-spoken man and a new friend of her master's, he might be able to persuade him to give up any such crazy notion. She found him pacing the patio of his house, and, perspiring and flurried, she fell at his feet the moment she saw him. Carrasco, seeing how distressed and overcome she was, said to her, "What is this, mistress housekeeper? What has happened to you? One would think your heart broken." "Nothing, Signor Samson," said she, "only that my master is breaking out, plainly breaking out." "Whereabouts is he breaking out, Signora?" asked Samson. "Has any part of his body burst?" "He's only breaking out at the door of his madness," she replied. "I mean, dear Signor Bachelor, that he is going to break out again, to hunt all over the world for what he calls ventures, though I don't make out why he gives them that name. The first time he was brought back to us slung across the back of an ass, and belabored all over. And the second time he came in an ox cart, shut up in a cage, in which he persuaded himself he was enchanted, and the poor creature was in such a state that the mother that bore him would not have known him, lean, yellow, with his eyes sunk deep in the cells of his skull, so that to bring him round again, ever so little, cost me more than 600 eggs, as God knows, and all the world, and my hens too. That won't let me tell a lie." "That I can well believe," replied the bachelor, "for they are so good and so fat, and so well bred, that they would not say one thing for another, though they were to burst for it. In short, then, mistress housekeeper, that is all, and there is nothing the matter, except what it is feared Don Quixote may do." "No, Signor," said she. "Well, then," returned the bachelor, "don't be uneasy, but go home in peace. Get me ready something hot for breakfast, and while you are on the way, say the prayer of Santa Apollonia, that is, if you know it, for I will come presently, and you will see miracles." "Woe is me," cried the housekeeper. "Is it the prayer of Santa Apollonia you would have me say? That would do if it was the toothache my master had, but it is in the brains, what he has got." "I know what I'm saying, mistress housekeeper. Go, and don't set yourself to argue with me, for you know I am a bachelor of Salamanca, and one cannot be more of a bachelor than that," replied Carrasco. And with this the housekeeper retired, and the bachelor went to look for the curate, and arranged with him what will be held in its proper place. While Don Quixote and Sancho were shut up together, they had a discussion which the history records with great precision and scrupulous exactness. Sancho said to his master, "Signor, I have induced my wife to let me go with your worship wherever you choose to take me." "Induced, you should say, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "not educed." "Once or twice, as well as I remember," replied Sancho. "I have begged of your worship not to mend my words, if so be as you understand what I mean by them. And if you don't understand them, to say Sancho or devil, I don't understand thee. And if I don't make my meaning plain, then you may correct me, for I'm so facile." "I don't understand thee, Sancho," said Don Quixote at once, "for I know not what I am facile means." "So facile means I am so much that way," replied Sancho. "I understand thee still less now," said Don Quixote. "Well, if you don't understand me," said Sancho, "I don't know how to put it. I know no more, God help me." "Oh, now I have hit it," said Don Quixote. "Thou should say thou art so docile, tractable, and gentle that thou wilt take what I say to thee, and submit to what I teach thee." "I would bet," said Sancho, "that from the very first you understood me, and knew what I meant, but you wanted to put me out that you might hear me make another couple of dozen blunders. Maybe so, replied Don Quixote, but to come to the point, what does Teresa say? Teresa says, replied Sancho, that I should make sure with your worship, and that papers speak and beards be still, for he who binds does not wrangle. Since one take is better than two, I'll give these. And I say a woman's advice is no great thing, and he who won't take it is a fool. And so say I, said Don Quixote. Continue, Sancho, my friend. Go on, you talk pearls today. The fact is, continued Sancho, that as your worship knows better than I do, we are all of us liable to death, and today we are, and tomorrow we are not, and the lamb goes as soon as the sheep. And nobody can promise himself more hours of life in this world than God may be pleased to give him, for death is death, and when it comes to knock at our life's door, it is always urgent, and neither prayers, nor struggles, nor scepters, nor mitres can keep it back, as common talk and report say, and as they tell us from the pulpits every day. All that is very true, said Don Quixote, but I cannot make out what thou art driving at. What I'm driving at, said Sancho, is that your worship settles some fixed wages for me, to be paid monthly while I'm in your service, and that the same be paid me out of your estate. For I don't care to stand on rewards, which either come late or ill or never at all. God help me with my own. In short, I would like to know what I'm to get, be it much or little, for the hen will lay on one egg, and many littles make much, and so long as one gains something, there is nothing lost. To be sure, if it should happen that your worship were to give me that island you have promised me, I am not so ungrateful nor so grasping, but that I would be willing to have the revenue of such island valued and stopped out of my wages in due promotion. Sancho, my friend, replied Don Quixote, sometimes proportion may be as good as promotion. I see, said Sancho. I'll bet I ought to have said proportion, and not promotion, but it is no matter, as your worship has understood me. And so well understood, returned Don Quixote, that I have seen into the depths of thy thoughts, and know the mark thou art shooting at with the countless shafts of thy proverbs. Look here, Sancho, I would readily fix thy wages if I had ever found any instance in the histories of the knights errant to show or indicate, but the slightest hint what their squires used to get monthly or yearly. But I have read all or the best part of their histories, and I cannot remember reading of any knight-errant having assigned fixed wages to his squire. I only know that they all served on reward, and that when they least expected it, if good luck attended their masters, they found themselves recompensed with an island or something equivalent to it, or at the least they were left with a title or lordship. If with these hopes and additional inducements you, Sancho, please to return to my service, well and good, but to suppose that I am going to disturb or unhinge the ancient usage of knight-errantry is all nonsense. And so, my Sancho, get you back to your house and explain my intentions to your Teresa, and if she likes and you like to be on reward with me, all well. If not, we remain friends. For if the pigeon house does not lack food, it will not lack pigeons. And bear in mind, my son, that a good hope is better than a bad holding, and a good grievance better than a bad compensation. I speak in this way, Sancho, to show you that I can shower down proverbs just as well as yourself, and in short, I mean to say, and I do say, that if you don't like to come on reward with me, and run the same chance that I run, God be with you and make a saint of you. For I shall find plenty of squires more obedient and painstaking, and not so thick-headed or talkative as you are. When Sancho heard his master's firm, resolute language, a cloud came over the sky with him, and the wings of his heart drooped. For he had made sure that his master would not go without him for all the wealth of the world. And as he stood there dumbfounded and moody, Samson Carrasco came in with the housekeeper and niece, who were anxious to hear by what arguments he was about to dissuade the master from going to seek adventures. The arch-wag Samson came forward, and embraced him as he had done before, said with a loud voice, "O flower of knight-errantry! O shining light of arms! O honor and mirror of the Spanish nation! May God Almighty in His infinite power grant that any person or persons who would impede or hinder thy third sally may find no way out of the labyrinth of their schemes, nor ever accomplish what they most desire. And then, turning to the housekeeper, he said, Mistress Housekeeper may just as well give over saying the prayer of Santa Apollonia, for I know it is a positive determination of the spheres the Signor Don Quixote shall proceed to put into execution his new and lofty designs, and I should lay a heavy burden on my conscience did I not urge and persuade this knight not to keep the might of his strong arm and virtue of his valiant spirit any longer curbed and checked. For by his inactivity he is defrauding the world of the redress of wrongs, of the protection of orphans, of the honor of virgins, of the aid of widows, and of the support of wives, and other matters of this kind appertaining, belonging proper and peculiar to the order of knight-errantry. On then, my Lord Don Quixote, beautiful and brave, let your worship and highness set out today rather than tomorrow, and if anything be needed for the execution of your purpose, here am I ready in person and purse to supply the want. And were it requisite to attend your magnificence as squire, I should esteem it the happiest good fortune. At this, Don Quixote, turning to Sancho, said, Did I not tell thee, Sancho, there would be squires enough and to spare for me? See now who offers to become one. No less than the illustrious bachelor Samson Carrasco, the perpetual joy and delight of the courts of the Salamancan schools. Sound in body, discreet, patient under heat or cold, hunger or thirst, with all the qualifications requisite to make a knight-errant squire. But heaven forbid that, to gratify my own inclination, I should shake or shatter this pillar of letters and vessel of the sciences, and cut down this towering palm of the fair and liberal arts. Let this new Samson remain in his own country, and, bringing honor to it, bring honor at the same time on the grey heads of his venerable parents. For I will be content with any squire that comes to hand, as Sancho does not deign to accompany me. I do deign, said Sancho, deeply moved and with tears in his eyes. It shall not be said of me, master mine, he continued, the bread eaten and the company dispersed. Nay, I come of no ungrateful stock, for all the world knows, but particularly my own town, who the Panzas from whom I am descended were, and, what is more, I know and have learned, by many good words and deeds, your worship's desire to show me favour, and if I have been bargaining more or less about my wages, it was only to please my wife, who, when she sets herself to press the point, no hammer drives the hoops of a cask as she drives one to do what she wants. But after all, a man must be a man, and a woman a woman. And as I am a man anyhow, which I can't deny, I will be one in my own house too. Let who will take it amiss. And so there's nothing more to do but for your worship to make your will with its codicil in such a way that it can't be provoked. And let us set out at once to save Signor Samson's soul from suffering, as he says his conscience obliges him to persuade your worship to sally out upon the world the third time. So I offer again to serve your worship faithfully and loyally, as well and better than all the squires that served knights-errant in times past or present. The bachelor was filled with amazement when he heard Sancho's phraseology and style of talk. For though he had read the first part of his master's history, he never thought that he could be so droll as he was there described. But now, hearing him talk of a will and codicil that could not be provoked, instead of will and codicil that could not be revoked, he believed all that he had read of him, and set him down as one of the greatest simpletons of modern times. And he said to himself that two such lunatics as master and men the world had never seen. In fine, Don Quixote and Sancho embraced one another and made friends, and by the advice and with the approval of the great Carrasco, who was now their oracle, it was arranged that their departure should take place 3 days thence, by which time they could have all that was requisite for the journey ready, and procure a close helmet, which Don Quixote said he must by all means take. Samson offered him one, as he knew a friend of his who had it would not refuse it to him, though it was more dingy with rust and mildew than bright and clean like burnished steel. The curses which both housekeeper and niece poured out on the bachelor were past counting. They tore their hair, they clawed their faces, and in the style of the hired mourners that were once in fashion, they raised a lamentation over the departure of their master and uncle, as if it had been his death. Samson's intention in persuading him to sally forth once more was to do what the history relates farther on, all by the advice of the curate and barber, with whom he had previously discussed the subject. Finally, then, During those 3 days, Don Quixote and Sancho provided themselves with what they considered necessary, and Sancho having pacified his wife, and Don Quixote his niece and housekeeper, at nightfall, unseen by anyone except the bachelor, who thought fit to accompany them half a league out of the village, they set out for El Toboso, Don Quixote on his good Rocinante and Sancho on his old dapple. His alforjas furnished with certain matters in the way of victuals, and his purse with money that Don Quixote gave him to meet emergencies. Samson embraced him, and entreated him to let him hear of his good or evil fortunes, so that he might rejoice over the former or condole with him over the latter, as the laws of friendship required. Don Quixote promised him he would do so, and Samson returned to the village, and the other two took the road for the great city of El Toboso.
好，呢一節讀到嚟呢度啦。主僕兩人少少嘅好有禮貌嘅爭論呢，就係究竟 Sancho 可唔可以喺 Don Quixote 身上攞到佢嘅人工呢？咁 Sancho 就係話唔係我自己嘅意思嚟嘅，係我太太要嘅。咁 Don Quixote 就話歷史上面揾唔到一個 squire 咧係可以攞到人工嘅，你只係可以攞到我哋嘅戰利品，我甚至乎咧可以獎一個島俾你。如果我哋咁好運嘅話，咁但係咧人工咧係冇嘅，正如我自己一樣都係冇人工嘅。然之後佢就話我可以咁講啦，而家有好多人，如果我想要嘅話，都會好希望嚟做我嘅侍從。如果你覺得係紆尊降貴嘅，咁都冇辦法啦，你翻去同你太太講啊。咁 Sancho 咧呢一刻佢都覺得哎呀唔知講咩好啦。一方面咧又想講到字字珠璣啦，但係另一方面咧自己嘅表達能力咧實在係有限。而家呢個時候咧 Samson 咧就嚟到啦Samson Carrasco。咁點解佢會嚟到咧？就因為咧Don Quixote嘅二生女同佢管家就請求佢就嚟勸止Don Quixote咧出發嘅，因為咧佢實在覺得Don Quixote咁樣再出去咧會有生命危險啊！即係根據上兩次佢翻嚟嗰個狀態，覺得就係太擔心啦。咁 Samson 有口答應啦，然之後嚟到啦。咁 Samson 咧就正如讀者嘅預期一樣啦，就係大力咁樣支持鼓吹，無論一切方法都會滿足佢嘅要求，送Don Quixote上路。為此咧Don Quixote都高興嘅，某程度上。Don Quixote二生女同埋個管家當然係非常之嬲怒啦嚇，因為呢個 Samson 根本就係唔理佢哋嘅諗法嘅，喺佢嘅立場係送佢去死，咁但係都冇辦法啦。Don Quixote同 Sancho 咧就成立主僕嘅契約，亦都定咗咧3日後咧就出發啦。咁故事嚟到第7節咧都係未出發嘅，咁啊希望俾下一節咧真係要上路啦。我哋睇下呢字有啲咩字同大家分享。Tractable T-R-A-C-T-A-B-L-E 形容詞嚟嘅，形容一個人嘅，人有一個人嘅性格一個人啊 ，easy to control or influence 容易控制。咁文中咧用呢個字咧去形容 Sancho 嘅 Don Quixote 咁用呢個字嚟形容佢嘅。Inducement I-N-D-U-C-E-M-E-N-T 名詞嚟嘅 ，a thing that persuades or leads someone to do something 一個誘因，一個誘惑，一樣嘢嚟嘅。佢引誘到人去做其他嘢，即係可能係金錢或者啲虛無啲嘢都得嘅權力一個誘因。Perpetual 都係實用詞 P-E-R-P-E-T-U-A-L 形容詞嚟嘅 ，never ending or changing, occurring repeatedly, so frequent as to seem endless and uninterrupted。如果形容一個植物嘅咧，就係 blooming or fruiting several times in one season。呢個喺呢度係實用。文中咧就係話一個 perpetual 形容 Carrasco 嘅，話佢永恆無不間斷咧都係咁開心嘅，帶俾人歡愉。好，呢一節讀到呢度，下一次就大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽2.0，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 讀到 Part 2嘅 Chapter 8第8節。呢一節嘅名叫做 Wherein is related what befell Don Quixote on his way to see his lady Dulcinea de Toboso。咁上一回咧就講主僕兩位 Don Quixote、Sancho 終於上路啦，真係身體力行地上路啦，唔再係精神上嘅上路，係真係肉體上嘅上路。決定咗3日之後喺個鄉村度出發， 進行佢哋第3次嘅冒險啦。咁事前同屋企人嘅交代啦，同學者嘅溝通啦，同村民嘅道別啦，呢啲應該會做晒噶啦。好，我哋睇下呢一節佢哋嘅冒險旅程。
Blessed be Allah the All-Powerful, says Hamate Benegeli on beginning this 8th chapter. Blessed be Allah, he repeats 3 times. And he says he utters these thanksgivings at seeing that he has now got Don Quixote and Sancho fairly afield, and that the readers of his delightful history may reckon that the achievements and humours of Don Quixote and his squire are now about to begin. And he urges them to forget the former chivalries of the ingenious gentleman, and to fix their eyes on those that are to come, which now begin on the road to El Toboso, as the others began on the plains of Montiel. Nor is it much that he asks in consideration of all he promises. And so he goes on to say, Don Quixote and Sancho were left alone, and the moment Samson took his departure, Rocinante began to neigh, and Dapple to sigh, which by both knight and squire was accepted as a good sign and a very happy omen, though, if the truth is to be told, the sighs and brays of Dapple were louder than the neighings of the hack, from which Sancho inferred that his good fortune was to exceed and overtop that of his master, building perhaps upon some judicial astrology that he may have known, though the history says nothing about it. All that can be said is that when he stumbled or fell, he was heard to say he wished he had not come out, for by stumbling and falling there was nothing to be got but a damaged shoe or a broken rib, and fool as he was not much astray in this. Said Don Quixote, Sancho, my friend, night is drawing on upon us as we go, and more darkly than will allow us to reach El Toboso by daylight. For there I am resolved to go before I engage in another adventure, and there I shall obtain the blessing and generous permission of the peerless Dulcinea, with which permission I expect and feel assured that I shall conclude and bring to a happy termination every perilous adventure, for nothing in life makes knights-errant more valorous than finding themselves favoured by the ladies. So I believe, replied Sancho, but I think it will be difficult for your worship to speak with her or see her, at any rate where you will be able to receive her blessing, unless indeed she throws it over the wall of the yard where I saw her the time before, when I took her the letter that told of the follies and mad things your worship was doing in the heart of Sierra Morena. Didst thou take that for a yard wall, Sancho? Said Don Quixote. Where or at which thou sawest that never sufficiently extolled grace and beauty? It must have been the gallery, corridor, or portico of some rich and royal palace. It might have been all that, returned Sancho, but to me it looked like a wall, unless I am short of memory. At all events, let us go there, Sancho, said Don Quixote, for, so that I see her, it is the same to me whether it be over a wall, or at a window, or through the chink of a door, or the grate of a garden, for any beam of the sun of a beauty that reaches my eyes will give light to my reason and strength to my heart, so that I shall be unmatched and unequalled in wisdom and valour. Well, to tell the truth, Señor, said Sancho, when I saw that sun of the lady Dulcinea de Toboso, it was not bright enough to throw out beams at all. It must have been that as her grace was sifting that wheat I told you of, the thick dust she raised came before her face like a cloud and dimmed it. What? Dost thou still persist, Sancho, said Don Quixote, in saying, thinking, believing, and maintaining that my lady Dulcinea was sifting wheat, that being an occupation and task entirely at variance with what is and should be the employment of persons of distinction, who are constituted and reserved for other avocations and pursuits that show their rank a bowshot off? Thou hast forgotten, O Sancho, those lines of our poet wherein he paints for us how, in their crystal abodes, those four nymphs employed themselves who rose from their love taggers and seated themselves in a verdant meadow to embroider those tissues which the ingenious poet there describes to us, how they were worked and woven with gold and silk and pearls, and something of this sort must have been the employment of my lady when thou sawest her. Only that the spite which some wicked enchanter seems to have against everything of mine changes all those things that give me pleasure, and turns them into shapes unlike their own. And so I fear that in the history of my achievements, which they say is now in print, if haply its author was some sage who is an enemy of mine, he will have put one thing for another, mingling 1,000 lies with untruth, and amusing himself by relating transactions which have nothing to do with the sequence of a true history. O envy, root of all countless evils, and cankerworm of the virtues, all the vices, Sancho, bring some kind of pleasure with them, but envy brings nothing but irritation, bitterness, and rage. So I say too, replied Sancho, and I suspect in that legend or history of us that the bachelor Samson Carrasco told us he saw, my honor goes dragged in the dirt, knocked about, up and down, sweeping the streets, as they say, and yet on the faith of an honest man, I never spoke ill of any enchanter, and I am not so well off that I am to be envied. To be sure, I am rather sly, and I have a certain spice of the rogue in me, but all is covered by the great cloak of my simplicity, always natural and never acted, and if I had no other merit save that I believe, as I always do, firmly and truly in God, and all the Holy Roman Catholic Church holds and believes, and that I am a mortal enemy of the Jews, the historians ought to have mercy on me and treat me well in their writings. But let them say what they like. Naked was I born, naked I find myself, I neither lose nor gain, nay, while I see myself put into a book and passed on from hand to hand over the world, I don't care a fig. Let them say what they like of me. That, Sancho, returned Don Quixote, reminds me of what happened to a famous poet of our own day, who, having written a bitter satire against all the courtesan ladies, did not insert or name in it a certain lady of whom it was questionable whether she was one or not. She, seeing she was not in the list of the poet, asked him what he had seen in her that he did not include her in the number of the others, telling him he must add to his satire and put her in a new part, or else look out for the consequences. The poet did as she bade him, and left her without a shred of reputation, and she was satisfied by getting fame, though it was infamy. In keeping with this is what they relate of that shepherd who set fire to the famous temple of Diana, by repute one of the 7 wonders of the world, and burned it with the sole object of making his name live in after ages. And, though it was forbidden to name him, or mention his name by word of mouth or in writing, lest the object of his ambition should be attained, nevertheless it became known that he was called Erostratus. And something of the same sort is what happened in the case of the great Emperor Charles V, and a gentleman in Rome. The emperor was anxious to see that famous temple of the Rotunda, called in ancient times the temple of all the gods, but nowadays, by a better nomenclature, of all the saints, which is the best preserved building of all those of pagan construction in Rome, and the one which best sustains the reputation of mighty words and magnificence of its founders. It is in the form of a half-orange, of enormous dimensions, and well-lighted, though no light penetrates it save that which is emitted by a window, or rather round skylight, at the top. And it was from this that the emperor examined the building. A Roman gentleman stood by his side and explained to him the skillful construction and ingenuity of the vast fabric and its wonderful architecture. And when they had left the skylight, he said to the emperor, 1,000 times, your sacred majesty, the impulse came upon me to seize your majesty in my arms and fling myself down from yonder skylight, so as to leave behind me in the world a name that would last forever. I am thankful to you for not carrying such an evil thought into effect, said the emperor, and I shall give you no opportunity in future of again putting your loyalty to the test, and I therefore forbid you ever to speak to me or to be where I am. And he followed up these words by bestowing a liberal bounty upon him. My meaning is, Sancho, that the desire of acquiring fame is a very powerful motive. What, thinkest thou, was it that flung Horatius in full armor down from the bridge into the depths of the Tiber? What burned the hand and arm of Mutius? What impelled the courtiers to plunge into the deep, burning gulf that opened in the midst of Rome? What, in opposition to all the omens that declared against him, made Julius Caesar cross the Rubicon? And to come to more modern examples, what scuttled the ships and left stranded and cut off the gallant Spaniards under the command of the most courteous Cortes in the New World? All these and a variety of other great exploits are, were, and will be the work of fame that mortals desire as a reward and a portion of the immortality that famous deeds deserve. Though we Catholic Christians and knights-errant look more to that future glory that is everlasting in the ethereal regions of heaven than to the vanity of the fame that is to be acquired in this present transitory life, a fame that, however long it may last, must after all end with the world itself, which has its own appointed end. So that, O Sancho, in what we do, we must not overpass the bounds which the Christian religion we profess has assigned to us. we have to slay pride in giants, envy by generosity and nobleness of heart, anger by calmness of demeanor and equanimity, gluttony and sloth by the spareness of our diet and the length of our vigils, lust and lewdness by the loyalty we preserve to those whom we have made the mistresses of our thoughts, indolence by traversing the world in all directions seeking opportunities of making ourselves, besides Christians, famous knights. Such, Sancho, are the means by which we reach those extremes of praise that fair fame carries with it. All that your worship has said so far, said Sancho, I have understood quite well. But still I would be glad if your worship would dissolve a doubt for me, which has just this minute come into my mind. So, thou meanest, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Say on, in God's name, and I will answer as well as I can. Tell me, Senor, Sancho went on to say, those Julys or Augusts, and all those venturous knights that you say are now dead, where are they now? The heathens, replied Don Quixote, are, no doubt, in hell. The Christians, if they were good Christians, are either in purgatory or in heaven. Very good, said Sancho. But now I want to know, the tombs where the bodies of those great lords are, have they silver lamps before them, or are the walls of their chapels ornamented with crutches, winding sheets, tresses of hair, legs, and eyes in wax? Or what are they ornamented with? To which Don Quixote made answer, the tombs of the heathens were generally sumptuous temples. The ashes of Julius Caesar's body were placed on the top of a stone pyramid of vast size, which they now call in Rome St. Peter's Needle. The Emperor Hadrian had for a tomb a castle as large as a good-sized village, which they called the Molles Adriani, and is now the castle of St. Angelo in Rome. The Queen Artemisia buried her husband Mausolus in a tomb which was reckoned one of the 7 wonders of the world, but none of these tombs, or of the many others of the heathens, were ornamented with winding sheets or any of those other offerings and tokens that show that they who are buried there are saints. That's the point I'm coming to, said Sancho. And now tell me, which is the greater work, to bring a dead man to life or to kill a giant? The answer is easy, replied Don Quixote. It is a greater work to bring to life a dead man. Now I have got you, said Sancho. In that case, the fame of them who bring the dead to life, who give sight to the blind, cure cripples, restore health to the sick, and before those tombs there are lamps burning, and those chapels are filled with devout folk on their knees, adoring their relics, be a better fame in this life, and another than that which all the heathen emperors and knight-errant that have ever been in the world have left or may leave behind them. That I grant too, said Don Quixote. Then this fame, these favors, these privileges, or whatever you call it, said Sancho, belong to the bodies and relics of the saints who, with the approbation and permission of our Holy Mother Church, have lamps, tapers, winding sheets, crutches, pictures, eyes, and legs, by means of which they increase devotion and add to their own Christian reputation. Kings carry the bodies or relics of saints on their shoulders, and kiss bits of their bones, and enrich and adorn their oratories and favorite altars with them. What wouldst thou have me infer from all thou hast said, Sancho? Asked Don Quixote. My meaning is, said Sancho, let us set about becoming saints, and we shall obtain more quickly the fair fame we are striving after. For you know, Signor, yesterday or the day before yesterday, they canonized or beautified 2 little barefoot friars, and it is now reckoned the greatest good luck to kiss or touch the iron chains with which they girt and tortured their bodies, and they are held in greater veneration. So it is said, than the sword of Roland in the armory of our Lord the King, whom God preserve. So that, Signor, it is better to be an humble little friar, or no matter what order, than a valiant knight-errant. With God, a couple of dozen of pennons lashing are of more avail than 2,000 lance thrusts, be they given to giants or monsters or dragons. All that is true, returned Don Quixote, but we cannot all be friars, and many are the ways by which God takes his own to heaven. Chivalry is a religion. There are sainted knights in glory. Yes, said Sancho, but I have heard say that there are more friars in heaven than knights-errant. That, said Don Quixote, is because those in religious orders are more numerous than knights. The errants are many, said Sancho. Many, replied Don Quixote, but few they who deserve the name of knights. With these and other discussions of the same sort, they passed that night and the following day without anything worth mention happening to them, whereat Don Quixote was not a little dejected. But at length the next day, at daybreak, they descried the great city of Del Toboso, at the sight of which Don Quixote's spirit rose and Sancho's fell, for he did not know Dulcinea's house, nor in all his life had he ever seen her, any more than his master, so that they were both uneasy, the one to see her, the other at not having seen her, and Sancho was at a loss to know what he was to do when his master sent him to El Toboso. In the end, Don Quixote made up his mind to enter the city at nightfall, and they waited until the time came among some oak trees that were near El Toboso. And when the moment they had agreed upon arrived, they made their entrance into the city, where something happened to them that may fairly be called something.
好，呢一節主要都係主僕兩人之間嘅對話啦，有關於遊俠比較深層次咧，可以咁講啦嘅一啲解讀。Sancho 咧就認為要做一個騎士咁辛苦，又要犧牲。如果你想做聖人嘅話，不如直接去做聖人啊！點解要做騎士啊？咁而Don Quixote咧就話，因為騎士精神係遊俠呢樣嘢本身，佢就係一種宗教，佢就係一個信仰。以Don Quixote嘅狂熱程度咧，唔可以反駁到佢啊！但係呢個係純粹係佢個人嘅睇法啦。呢樣嘢唔係派到個其他人度咧，我諗就難啲。討論呢一個遊俠作為聖人嘅嘢之前呢，兩個人又會討論到有關於 Dulcinea del Toboso 啦，呢個Don Quixote嘅情人啦。咁 Sancho 始終都係要話俾佢聽 El Toboso 其實只係一個好普通嘅農家女子啫，做啲好簡單嘅粗活啫。咁但係Don Quixote就一廂情願認為佢唔係，佢係一個備受尊重嘅人，佢係唔會做呢啲嘢作為佢嘅日常嘅。佢如果係做呢啲嘢咧，佢只不過係因為佢嘅興趣。佢解釋，如果 Sancho 真係見到呢啲嘢咧，只不過係因為有人施咗魔法，有妖術令到佢睇錯，係幻象嚟嘅。咁二人嘅對話就個思辨一路好廣速飛行，直至到佢終於嚟到 El Toboso 呢個 Dulcinea 身處嘅地方，而兩個人嘅心情咧，各自咧有各自嘅難受。一個咧就係唔知佢喺邊，一個咧就係從來冇見到佢。咁究竟會點做咧？面對Dulcinea 兩個人會點做咧？咁就下回分解啦。睇下呢節有啲咩字同大家分享。Avocation，Avocation，A-V-O-C-A-T-I-O-N， 名詞嚟嘅 ，a hobby or minor occupation， 一啲職志啊，一啲興趣啊。Verdant， 形容詞嚟嘅 ，V-E-R-D-A-N-T， verdant。通常形容啲鄉村地方啦 ，green with grass or other rich vegetation， 綠油油嘅。呢個字比較少用啊 ，nomenclature，N-O-M-E-N-C-L-A-T-U-R-E， 比較少見啊 ，nomenclature， 名詞嚟嘅 ，the devising or choosing of names for things, especially in the science or other discipline。通常喺某一個科學嘅領域啊，或者一啲學術嘅領域啊嘅一啲命名嘅方法，一啲命名法啦 ，nomenclature。好，我哋呢一節讀到呢度，下一節再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。